Hey, how you doing? Nope, my name's not Jeremy. I'm the Lawnmower Lady, and I like fixing small engines. Today's video is going to be on this Ryobi blower. The guy that owns it said he was having trouble towards the end of last year getting it started, and he can't get it started at all this year. I'm going to run through a few checks before I really spend a lot of time trying to tear down the carburetor and fix that stuff. So follow along. I'll show you what happens. This little guy is a Ryobi model number RY09056. And it looks like it was manufactured in 2014, so it's got a few years on it. And no doubt the gasoline is stale, or at least several months old. Pull that cap out of there. And the fuel lines actually look pretty good, surprisingly, for the age of them. But going to empty out all this stale fuel and add some fresh fuel and see what happens. So the primer bulb seems to be working fine. Next thing is I'm going to pull the spark plug and do a compression check on here. Again, if there's no compression, there's no point in spending a lot of time on this. Well, despite the fact that the plug looks pretty good, there's my first problem with it, those words right there. But it actually looks pretty good, the color-wise. It's sort of nice chocolate brown. I'm going to use a compression tester and screw that in. If you don't have a compression tester, you can just hold your thumb over the spark plug hole and pull and see if it's pushing your thumb away. It is pushing my thumb away, so no doubt there is some compression. Compression tester has an O-ring on the bottom, and you just want to screw this in by hand. No tools required until it rests on the top of the cylinder. I'm going to pop on the compression head. Hopefully you can see that. And I'm going to give it several pulls. So, after about 20 pulls or so, this thing is up to 130. That's well enough compression for this thing to start. So I have my little screwdriver spark tool actually resting on the top of the cylinder head, and I'm going to hold the outside of this spark plug and see if we can see some spark there. And I see none whatsoever. Alright, trying this with a different spark catcher. Again, the metal part of my spark plug tool is touching the top of the cylinder. And hopefully it's just not a bad spark plug. Give it a couple of pulls. And I see absolutely nothing. So this could be a bad kill switch. I'll need to take the handle off to check that. And worst case, it's a bad coil. And either one of those, in my opinion, would be a catastrophic failure for one of these very inexpensive two-stroke. So unfortunately, to get to the coil, you have to remove actually both sides of this. These are T25 torque screws. There's several along this front edge right here. One more up here. And then two on the other side right here. You really don't need those to remove the tube, but they help a little bit. And then there is one more, once the tube comes out, there's one more little tab right there. Be careful to not break that. Let's try it this way. There we go. All right. Next is to remove the cylinder cover. That is a T20. There it is. While I'm on this side, I'm going to want to remove the throttle cable. And in order to do that, there is a screw right inside of there that holds the throttle cable sheath on. That'll give us the clearance to remove the throttle cable. Pull that out, and there's the clearance I need for that. Next thing is to remove the impeller. That takes a 13mm wrench. There's this sort of pronged nut on here, and in order to do that, because it turns in the same direction to loosen, you have to figure a way to stop the piston. And I use an old spark plug that I drilled out, and that's a nylon bolt from a toilet seat. Obviously, you're not going to have a tool like that. So you can actually just stuff in some old pull cord from a lawnmower. Just about a foot or so will take care of that. I'm just going to screw this tool in. Sometimes if you stuff too much of that cord in there, it can go out the exhaust port, and then it turns ugly when you have to chase something like that down. So, okay, so here we go. And that spins right on off of here. Little nut with the tangs in there, and that pops right off. There is a washer underneath here that sits, a shim that sits right inside of there. There's also a spacer tube that goes around the crankshaft. And lastly, there are 4 T20 Torx bolts in there, and my little socket won't get in that hole. Magnet is handy to pull those out. And one screw right there does not want to come out. Alright, that one screw right there going in the block was a little recalcitrant, so I used a little punch, gave it a little tap very easily on there, some lubricating, penetrating oil on all sides of this, and finally it wants to come out. I did not want to break this off in the block. That would be really bad. And this should come right off. All right, that was the unhappy screw. So this little piece of plastic plopped out when I removed the blower, and it took me a while to figure this out, but this actually goes in this slot right here. It holds that grommet in on the pull cord, so I'm not going to leave it there because I'll just lose it again, but when you lose that or it falls out, that's where it goes. And I'm going to try to clean up a little bit of this penetrating oil there, and then sort of unthread the spark plug cable and the 2 kill wires to the switch. And alright, so we can get to the coil connections there, and those 2. So in order to properly test this ignition coil, it does need to come out of circuit. You get some crazy readings if you don't disconnect it completely from the blower. Remove the ground tab to actually I can use a power tool now that I have those broken loose. Alright, there's that one. Leave that attached. And then alrighty. And here's the ignition coil, which we'll test separately. I don't know what the specific readings are supposed to be. I couldn't find it online, but generally speaking, a lot of smaller 2-stroke chainsaws and that sort of thing, you test between this tab right here and the laminates. This is known as your primary coil, and that should be a couple of 100 ohms, and then you test between the high tension lead where your spark plug goes in and the laminates, and that should be several thousand. So let's see how this tests out. Get your just multimeter and set it on 20k ohms. That should cover us for any amount here. So we're going to put the positive lead on the tab sticking out. And if there's any corrosion, you'd have to sand this off, but there's nothing here. And so, as you can see, there is really nothing happening here. If I test them both together, I have no resistance whatsoever, but nothing on the primary, so we know the primary side is bad. And then to test the secondary side, sort of really doesn't matter now because we know the primary is bad, but the secondary side, you normally put your red test lead inside where the spark plug goes, make sure there's a good connection, and then test to the laminate side, and this is about 8,500 ohms. So without knowing the actual specs for this, the secondary side should be good, but I'm going to have to contact the guy that owns this thing and see if he wants to spend the money to replace the coil on this. Alright, so the guy that owns this thing said he wanted me to fix it. I gave him the option to, ideas of what the cost is going to be, which once this repair could wind up being almost half as much as what a new one would cost, and he said go ahead and fix it. Apparently his wife really likes the blower. So this is part number 850108013. It's a newer part. There was a little bit of confusion, but I did find out that it does appear to be the identical part number. They've superseded it with a different or a lower profile casing, but it looks to be functionally the same size and everything as the old one. As you can see, virtually identical. The only difference being is that the new part number ends in a 13 rather than a 31. I'm not sure why that is, but that's the way it is. It's been new and improved. Again, my meter is set on 20,000 ohms, and let's test the primary, which is between the tab and the laminate, and you see there's 0.77k, or right around 700 ohms. And if I test between the high tension lead with the red here, and the laminate, we're about 8.54. So that's pretty good indication that the other coil was doing okay on the secondary, but the primary was the problem. All right, if all you happen to have is a good old-fashioned analog meter, you can still test these coils on here. It's just going to require a little bit of math while you're working on this. The ohm scale is at the very top in red. It goes from 0 ohms right here all the way to 20,000 ohms over there. And 0 ohms would be continuity or no resistance whatsoever, as if there was a short circuit. And over here would measure the ohms. Now, where you place this is the scale right here. And if we were to set this on times 1 ohm, then we would read all the way over to here. So obviously, if we're trying to read 8,000 ohms, the needle is just going to be way up here between the 5K and the 2K, so we could set this on times 10, and where it would run, we would multiply that number by 10 or by 100. But since we're looking for somewhere in the thousands, we're going to put this on the 1,000 mark. So whatever reading we have, hopefully since we had around 8,000 ohms, the needle is going to go between the 5 and the 100 up here, and then we would multiply that number there times 1,000 to get the same 8.55 ohms. Not as accurate, but it gets you real close. So I'll show you how that works. And we know from the other one it's around 770 ohms, something like that, which means it's going to be on this scale, if we measured it on the 0.1 scale, which is down here, times 1, it's the needle should go way up here somewhere, which it does. But, you know, that's not very accurate. So if we want to get a more accurate reading, we could push this over to the times 10 scale, and it will show up down here between 50 and 100. But what you also want to do when you change on an analog meter the scale, you have to zero out. If you notice, I touched the two leads together, and on most all analog meters there is an adjustment on the side, which you have to very carefully zero out, so that now, as these are still touched together, my meter reads 0, and now we're on the times 10, so whatever reading here, we're going to multiply it by 10, so touch the negative to the kill switch, and that to the laminate, and you can see it is right at around 770 some ohms. So that's that side. All right, in the same regard, now that we know that the secondary side between the high tension lead and the laminates is around 8,000 ohms, to get a better accuracy, if I were to touch the positive inside of the high tension lead and touch the negative, you see it's way up there. You know, not a very good number. You know, you can tell it's up there, but for a little more accuracy, we're going to switch our meter over to the times 100 scale. Again, we need to zero the meter out, and it's just a hair off. Adjust it just a hair that way. Now, when we measure between the high tension lead and the laminate, you see it is around just at the 800 mark there, and we multiply that by 100 because it's on the times 100 scale, so there's our 8,000 ohms. We're going to assemble the blower housing. It has to go inside of the actual blower housing itself, and then we also have to connect these leads up. There is a bushing that goes around the shaft there, and there is a shim at the bottom of that. So if you've lost those in assembly or whatnot, thin shim goes on the bottom, then the bushing goes on there. The next thing is to assemble the coil, and in order to set the gap on the coil, we have to, I'm going to set it with the magnets against the coil. However, because we have that piston stop in there, I'm going to have to remove the piston stop to get the flywheel to turn all the way around. And you want to set the gap at about 0.010 inches, and generally speaking, that's about the thickness of a business card. See on the just above 0.0. If you don't have a business card, I sometimes use, I have little repair tags that I use, put on equipment. Again, I double that over, and that also is about 0.015, so that's close enough. The coil really only goes on one way. We're going to set this business card in here and let the magnet just suck that coil right up next to it. And that will automatically set our gap. I'm going to set these screws in loosely. This is a T20. Get that in. And then this is where it becomes a bit fiddly, because we have to attach the kill wire and the ground wire right there. So this is kind of odd. Got to make sure everything fits through there without breaking apart or without becoming an issue. Oops, and I put that screw on the wrong side. I'll take that back off again. So I'm going to turn this to where you can see all this. What's going on here? Got the one screw just loosely holding that on, and I've got the magnets rotated around so that it's holding it tight on there. The next thing is the ground wire, which is the red one with the ring terminal. Put that through one of the screws and place that now. I can go ahead and tighten down these screws because that business card is holding the coil at the proper gap. And then we're going to attach the other half of the kill wire. Make sure that's on there good and tight. Oops, sorry about the shaky cam. And then tighten down the last. Now these do need to be snug, however they don't need to be stripping out the aluminum on there. And the business card will slide out. And the flywheel spins freely. Remember the bushing that needs to be there. You want to make sure that these wires are not getting pinched. And we need to feed the crankshaft through the top, the center hole, and then the muffler through this hole right here. Center that on there and carefully drop that down. All right. And we're going to roll this over and make sure nothing is pinched. And I believe we'll be good there. Spark plug will go right on top. Now, these are the 4 screws that have the very fine threads on them. And these as well are going in the engine block. So I'm just going to get these started all together before I actually try to get them tightened down. And guess what I forgot to put in? I forgot to put in that plastic piece that holds that in. I'm not going to torture you with watching me undo all this again, so I'll be right back. Alright, so I put that back in, and I'm going to just look around the edges before I torque those down to make sure I'm not pinching any wires or any other thing there. That goes in these 4 mounting screws right there and there. So I think I'm good to go. The spark plug wire looks good. The kill wire and the switch, they all look good. But you don't want to strip them out. They are going into aluminum. Alright, so I am going to have to reinstall my piston stop. So I'll need to do that to tighten down the blower fan blade. Another shim here, and you can see by the witness marks, I don't think it really matters how it goes on, but there's a witness mark in the middle. So this goes on right here, and this keeps the flywheel from spinning and hitting. These little teeth fit in there, and we're going to screw this down until that's snug. This is a 13mm socket. And again, I don't know what the torque spec is on this, but it is just going to be snug. Alright, I do believe that that is as tight as that needs to go. And now I can remove my toilet seat piston stop. Now, before we get too far, test it and make sure it's running freely, which it is. The next thing is to assemble the other half of this blower housing. We're going to use these 9 screws that have the coarser threads on them. And since I did not remove this bottom piece on here, I have it hanging off the side of this table, my workbench. If you don't have a situation like this, you can always remove these 2 screws right there and take this out to make it a little easier. But this fits on. Get it lined up, which is a lot easier said than done. Wow, that was not easy. Now this takes the T25. I'm going to get these started. I'm not actually going to tighten them all the way down because up on the front where the blower tube comes out is a bit fiddly. So I'm just only going to get some of these started right now. Alright, before I go any further, I have to make sure that this part snaps on, snaps together. Yep, that's good. So I can go ahead and finish putting all the rest of these in. Remember, these are going into plastic. Don't strip them out. And remember the 2 on the back side, right here and here. The next thing is to attach the throttle cable, because we still have to tighten that down there. So push this little dog leg right through there. And we can check the throttle action, which will, once we tighten that guy down. And as you remember, there was a little screw right in there that held that in place. This is one of the smaller coarse threaded screws. Again, this is the T20. And check our throttle action. And it has its full travel there. If I was just a little bit smarter, I would have tested for spark before I got this far along. But it's not too bad because I can very easily get to the metal housing. Put a little something dark behind there, and hopefully we'll see some big old fat spark. Oh yeah, much better. I hope you can see that. I'm not using that torch plug. The actual plug for this is a Champion RCJ6Y. You can also use a BPM R7A NGK, which is what I am actually using. Put that in, get that snug, and 1/4 of a turn max. Snap that on top till you hear a positive click. There we go. And the last thing is to replace this cover with the 4 remaining little screws. That have the plastic threads, but they're just a little bit smaller. This uses the T20 Torx. Another one there, right above the carburetor. One goes right here in a little baffle. That is sort of attached to the carburetor. You might have to get in there and sort of jiggle that around. And the last one goes over right here by the tube. All right, let's get this outside and fire it up. I always mix stuff 45 to 1. It's a happy medium between the 40 to 1 and the 50 to 1 folks out there. I mix it up in small amounts in an old oil jug. Just enough to make sure this is running. And hopefully, don't need to do anything else to this unit. All right. Ten times prime. Set the throttle there and let her rip. I felt it pop there for a second. Okay, so it tended to want to, it takes a little while to warm up, and it might need just a little bit of carb adjustment there. A little bit of smoke coming off. I think that's just burn off from a little bit of fuel spillage on there, but I think it's good to go. So I guess the lesson here is it's not always carburetor issues. I will say, however, in the research that I went through trying to find the right part for this, there appears to be a lot of complaints online about these Ryobi coils, ignition coils going bad. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. This is the first Ryobi ignition coil I've had to replace. I've replaced others before, so I don't have a lot of track record to say, yes, this is good or this is bad. I'm hoping you learned something for the video, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did learn something, or if I gave you some good information on this, I'd appreciate you pushing the like button. That will really help the channel out a whole lot. Remember, I'm the Lawnmower Lady, and as I'm fond of saying, mow happy. Thank you for watching.